September 10, 1978, approximately 3 p.m. in the afternoon, Ronnie Peterson, the Super Swede, lost his life in a multi-car accident at the Italian Grand Prix of Monza. Racing journalists are quick to point out his actual death occurred September 11 at the hands of medical staff that by present-day standards of medicine, Ronnie Peterson may not have died. Even today his fans are so devastated, so crushed by his death, it is almost impossible to accept that Ronnie died directly from injuries sustained in a racing accident. Had Ronnie not been in that race car, at that moment, involved in the start of the Italian Grand Prix, he would in all probability be alive today, or have lived many years beyond the events of that day. It was the pinnacle of motorsport, Grand Prix Formula One racing, that claimed Ronnie's life that September day. The cause and effect of Ronnie accepting the risks of being strapped into a Grand Prix Formula One race car, a Lotus Type 78, a replacement car, that slammed headlong into a guardrail in excess of 100 miles per hour. Everything else surrounding that day are the subplays to a single compelling fact. Ronnie Peterson was lost to the racing world in a tragic motorcar racing accident. The many events of that day only deepen the loss for the man that has always been considered to have been the fastest driver of his day. Why is Ronnie's death always seemingly the start to any article about him? Is it that we need his death to define the standard by which his achievements, his talents can be measured? Or do we need his death in order to elevate Ronnie into a racing legend of mythical proportions? Is it that his death galvanized those involved in racing into actions that would later result in the safety standards that we see in racing today? Asking questions are easy, having answers not so easy. For this fan, the one facet clearly standing out is that in coming to know of Ronnie Peterson, his life, his career, his talent, his death, our own spirit can be lifted. We can know that every so often, there is one that is above us, one that measures to greatness. This is about that greatness. Slightly before 3 p.m., the field of the 1978 Italian Grand Prix of Monza left the starting grid for their one-circuit warm-up. As the cars arrived for staging the grid, the race starter threw the green light switch, effectively starting the race, before the entire field had come to a full stop. Cars at the front of the field that were stopped suddenly became obstacles for the moving portion of the field that accelerated rapidly up to racing speed on what for them was a rolling start. This produced a massive tangle of cars as the faster-moving cars in the back quickly began to overtake the barely moving cars that were accelerating from a stationary start. A classic accordion effect occurred on the field as the field approached the chicane. There are of course varying and different accounts of the accident, however, it is a general concurrence that as the faster-moving cars, upwards of 100 miles per hour, bunched together, Ricard Patrese's Arrow, which had qualified 12th, touched the McLaren of James Hunt starting from the 10th position. The contact caused Hunt to spin into the Lotus Type 78 of Ronnie Peterson. Ronnie was in the backup Lotus Type 78 due to a shunt the previous day in practice that had left Ronnie's Lotus Type 79 too damaged for the race. Ronnie Peterson's Lotus 78 was spun hard into the barriers on the right-hand side of the track, crushing the front of the car. Vittorio Brambilla, who had started from the back of the grid, took evasive action attempting to avoid the accident, however, to no avail as his Surtees crashed hard into Ronnie Peterson's Lotus. The Lotus 78 burst into flames, engulfing the car. 10 cars in mere moments were now involved in the accident. Ronnie Peterson, James Hunt, Riccardo Patrese, Vittorio Brambilla, Hans-Joachim Stuck, Patrick Di Pala, Didier Pironi, Derek Daly, Clay Ragazzoni and Brett Lunger were all involved in the melee. Ronnie Peterson was trapped inside the flame-engulfed Lotus 78. Team Lotus did have a spare Lotus 79, however, it had been built as a backup car for Mario Andretti, and as such the taller Peterson was unable to properly fit the backup 79. The team's remaining spare was the Lotus 78, the previous year's car, which was being taken around the F1 circuit that season with minimal maintenance. If Ronnie had been in his own Lotus 79 or even a properly fit 78, would he have been ahead of the accident off of qualifying? Would he have been able to avoid the accident if mid-pack? Questions prompted by speculation only. In an act of selflessness, John Hunt was out of his own McLaren barely before it came to rest, sprinting back down the track to Ronnie's flame-engulfed car. Fire crews in 1978 did not wear fire retardant suits that the drivers wore and could only attack the fire from a safe distance with fire extinguishers. John Hunt, now joined by drivers Ragazzoni and DePaler, using their fire-resistant driver suits with little regard to their own safety, managed to extract Peterson from the Lotus 78, with amazingly, only minor burns to Ronnie. Dragged from the burning car, he was laid in the middle of the track. Peterson was fully conscious, and obvious to all were the severe leg injuries he had sustained. Hunt would later state that he stopped Ronnie from looking at his legs in an effort to spare him further distress. With Ronnie out of the car, conscious and seemingly not life-threatened, track workers turned their attention to Brambilla, who had been hit on the head by a detached flying wheel and was comatose in his car. Brambilla would recover and continue to race in F1 until 1980.
My car flew up in the air and went spinning down the road, and then I saw, as I stopped, I saw a car on fire behind me, and nothing much going on, so I went and had a look to see what was going on.
This, in fact, was your friend and colleague Ronnie Peterson. Now, what was the state of his car, and what did you do about it?
Well, his car was in a bad state, and he was still in it, half in, and the thing was burning. There was one marshal there already who had arrived, who in fact was doing a terrific job because he was being very sensible. He had one extinguisher, and rather than blast the whole thing off in a vain attempt to try and put out 40 gallons of fuel, he was conserving it and just knocking down the flames around where Ronnie was, and that gave me a chance to go in and try and pull him out because he was trapped. You could get him half out, but he was trapped by his foot. And the guy was keeping the flames down there, and eventually we managed to get the steering wheel bent and get him freed off and pull him away.
Did you in fact speak to him after the accident?
No, I didn't speak to him, but when we took his helmet off, he was looking pretty distressed, obviously, but he was conscious, and he tried to sit up, and I thought it was best that he didn't, A, because of further damage, and B, because his legs looked pretty messy, and I didn't particularly want him to see him.
The injured drivers were transported to a hospital in Milan. The track was cleaned up and the race resumed. The race being won by Niki Lauda, John Watson second and Carlos Reutemann third. Now at hospital, Peterson's X-rays showed that he had 7 fractures in one leg and 3 in the other. The attending surgeons, after consulting with Ronnie himself, decided to operate in order to stabilize the bones. Following the operation and while recovering, during the evening bone marrow had entered into Peterson's bloodstream, resulting in fat globules forming on his major organs, lungs, liver and brain. By morning Ronnie was succumbing to full renal failure and was declared dead a few hours later. Ronnie Peterson's death was attributed to fat embolism. In retrospect, harsh judgments ensued aimed at the handling of the injured drivers and the often ruthless blaming of Patrese for the starting of the accident. John Hunt remaining the most vocal over the years, often delivering bitter diatribes against Patrese. Grave speculation surrounded the actions of track officials and police that had insisted on forming a human wall, stopping anyone, including Professor Sid Watkins, the then surgical advisor to Formula One, from entering the crash site. It is argued that the delay of between 11 to 18 minutes it took to get an ambulance sent to the crash scene and time consumed in transporting Peterson to hospital, was a primary contributor to his death. An argument that has merit. A fat embolism is a fairly rare condition that can follow fractures of the thigh. Fat deposits form in the blood vessels of the patient, which, in Peterson's case, blocked circulation through the lungs and starved his brain of oxygen. The quicker that medical attention is given, the greater is the likelihood of this rare condition not occurring. The accident and Ronnie's death is today credited with many new safety regulations having been implemented, making Formula One safer. Professor Watkins and the Formula One Constructors Association, FOCA, Chief Bernie Ecclestone, with the support of Niki Lauda and Jackie Stewart, concluded that a medical car should follow the Formula One cars on the first lap so that injured drivers could receive almost immediate medical help. It also was clear that expert firemen should be putting out fires as quickly as possible, instead of drivers having to pull their fellow racers from burning wrecks. Ronnie Peterson lost his life in a tragic racing crash in the 1978 Italian Grand Prix, filled with subplays of highly questionable responses by track workers, police, medical personnel and the management of Formula One racing. Ronnie Peterson, Biography. He was born Bengt Ronnie Peterson February 14, 1944 in Örebro in the neighborhood of Armby, Sweden. Nicknamed the Super Swede by F1 fans for his attacking driving style, Peterson, along with Stirling Moss and Gilles Villeneuve, would become regarded as one of the greatest drivers never to have won the Formula One World Championship. As did Ronnie Peterson, Villeneuve would also lose his life to Formula One racing. Expressing a keen interest in racing as a young child, Ronnie's father, at age 8, modified a wagon into a motor-powered vehicle. Ronnie would tear about the neighborhood, sun, snow, or rain. Ronnie moved into go-karts and the European karts arena. Ronnie, however, did not begin to attract attention until he was 18, when in 1962 he took second place in the Swedish Formula Karting Championship. Doing so also in 1964, 1965, and again in 1966. In 1965 Ronnie also competed in the European karting circuit, where he was honored as the best individual driver at the Team Euro Championship in Paris. Not like today, where a talented driver can be found at 13 years of age wheeling a race car around an American oval, Ronnie was age 22 when he entered into his first official car race. In late 1966 Ronnie entered a F3 race in a car built by Ronnie's father, Bengt and friend Sven Andersson, in the style of a Brabham. He moved out of the copy to an original Brabham, which he crashed in the first race he ran the car. He admitted to his own inexperience when he misjudged entry into a corner. Braking too late he made contact with the rear wheel of a competitor. The car somersaulted into the woods. Ronnie was extracted from the car without injury. Ronnie began crafting his racing skills in F3, and developed an ardent competition between himself and rival Ren Wiesel. He learned his skills well. In 1968 he won 12 times, and increased that to 15 wins out of 19 in 1969. His worst place finish being a fourth. 5 of these wins were international ones. Additionally, in 1969 he found rides in the F2 Lotus team of Roy Winkleman, and for the factory Techno team. October 5, 1969 he drove the new March 693 at Montfleury. Catching the sun square on and being blinded he slammed into a hay bale, breaking fuel line couplings. The car caught fire. This time Ronnie was hospitalized with several serious burns. Ronnie Peterson made his Formula One debut in a March 701 for the lightly funded Colin Crabb Antique Automobiles racing team at the 1970 Monaco Grand Prix. Lack of funding restricted Ronnie's testing for the privateer team, yet he qualified 12th in the 16-car field. Ronnie, never known then, nor after for his ability to aid in sorting out a car, did what was to become his trademark and fan-captivating style of driving. He simply took the car by its unruly neck and drove it as fast as it could go. Ronnie would finish 7th, 1 spot out of earning his first Grand Prix points. Martin Brundle saw fit to say of Ronnie's finish, "Position 7 is nothing, a point would have been much more memorable." Robin Hurd, however, saw it differently, asking reporters to please write that Ronnie was fantastic today, but just don't tell him. Peterson was the only March driver to finish the race. It would be Ronnie's best finish in his first season in Formula One. With each successive race following his Monaco debut, the Cosworth Ford DFE8 engine became just a bit more tired, with an inevitable gradual but steady reduction in the engine's horsepower. Yet Ronnie's 1970 season was not without its bright spots, as he also raced in the Euro F2 Trophy Series, taking 4th in the final standings. 1971 Ronnie moved up to the full March Works team, and made good things happen. He would tally 5 Formula One Grand Prix second places, earning him the runner-up position to Jackie Stewart for that year's World Championship. Ronnie was all about racing, and this same year he won no less than 5 F2 races and took the Euro F2 crown in a March 712M. He also raced in the World Sports Car Championship, winning the Watkins Glen 6 Hours with Andrea Do Adamic in an Alfa 33 thirds. 1972 would be a struggling year for the Super Swede. Staying with the March team for the season, the March 721 and 721X simply failed miserably. It would not be until Ronnie found himself in a F2-based 721G that Ronnie could again showcase his dynamic attacking style of driving. The 721G would take Peterson to his only podium of the season at Nürburgring. Outside of F1, Ronnie garnered 2 wins for Ferrari in sports cars. Late in 1972 Ronnie left the March Works team, signing with Team Lotus. He would partner with the newly crowned world champion Emerson Fittipaldi, driving the well-developed Lotus 72D. It looked to be a wise career move. July 1, 1973 Ronnie Peterson won his first Formula One race, winning the French Grand Prix. He would win 3 more times, winning in Austria, Italy and the United States. In spite of the 4 wins, Ronnie would find himself 3rd in World Championship points, directly related to the poor reliability of the 72D and 72E Lotus. Emerson Fittipaldi won 3 more races for a total of 7 wins for Team Lotus. However, it was Jackie Stewart, with his 3 wins, and consistently high finishes, that would claim the World Championship title. Jackie Stewart clinching his last world title at Monza, finishing 4th. The race being won by Peterson. 1974 would see Peterson win 3 more Formula One races. The French and Italian Grand Prix, along with what is considered the premier event of Formula One, the Monaco Grand Prix. Peterson had now cemented his status and was now simply considered to be the fastest man in Formula One. 1974, however, saw Peterson begin the season in a revolutionary new car design, the Lotus 76. The car's utter failure directly contributed to Peterson finishing fifth in the championship for the year. The Lotus 76 had a biplane rear wing, twin brake pedals and an automatic clutch. Designed around the 72D, it was intended to be a lighter, more technically advanced version. Accepting the car's failure, Team Lotus returned Peterson to the 72D, the car in which he would win his 3 1974 races with. Emerson Fittipaldi would win the World Championship driving for the Marlboro Team Texaco in the McLaren M23. 1977 could be summed up for Ronnie in one single word. Dismal? Peterson would drive for Tyrrell in 77, and he would be saddled with the now ineffective six-wheeled P34. To this day the P34 still has a place of nostalgia in the hearts of fans. The P34 actually showed promise in its debut in 1976, being remarkably competitive. However, the world of F1 is in constant forward change, and unfortunately Goodyear tire manufacturing sealed the fate of the P34 when Goodyear stopped all further tire development of the front wheels. In 1977 the P34 was simply not able to keep up to the advances propelling other F1 teams. The best finish Peterson attained in 1977 was a single third place at the Belgium Grand Prix. 1977 had another highly interesting development that would significantly impact Peterson's quest for the World Championship title. Mario Andretti. Niki Lauda would win his second of 3 World Championships in 1977. However, the world of F1 was much abuzz about Mario Andretti, winner of 4 races in the 1977 season and heir apparent for the crown in 1978. 1978 saw Peterson surprise the world of F1 when he left Tyrrell and returned to John Player Team Lotus, partnering with Mario Andretti. Lotus had delivered for the 1978 season the innovative ground effects Lotus 79. It was a dominating race car, and in the hand of Mario and Ronnie, it would prove to dominate the 78 season. Peterson would take wins in the South African Grand Prix, with a last lap charge that earned him the victory over Patrick de Paler. Peterson would also stand atop the podium at the Austrian Grand Prix. However, what earned Peterson the respect of every one of his peers, was his commitment to being the second driver in rank on the team, driver 1 being Mario Andretti. It has long been argued that had Ronnie chosen to disobey team orders, he very well might have been the champion. Instead, Ronnie displayed immense loyalty to the team, and Mario Andretti and Ronnie Peterson would finish 1, 2 in no less than 4 races. Mario Andretti won the coveted 1978 World Drivers' Championship. Remarkably, and often overlooked, is that Ronnie Peterson finished second in the standings for the World Drivers' Championship, not earning a single point in the final 3 races of the season due to his tragic death at Monza of the same year. Throughout his career, and at the height of his skills during the 1970s, Ronnie Peterson had the reputation of being the fastest driver in F1. To his fans, Ronnie Peterson was simply the Super Swede. 9 years later, on December 19, 1987, former top model Barbara Edwardson, Peterson's widow, committed suicide. The couple being survived by their daughter Nina Louise Peterson.